My name is Clarissa Thompson, and at 32, I've built a successful life despite my parents refusing to help with my college education. You need to learn independence, they told me back then. Now, 12 years later, they've shown up at my doorstep with a surprising request. They want me to contribute $150,000 for my younger sister Sophia's extravagant wedding. The same sister who received everything I was denied. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, and it awakened old wounds I thought were long healed. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to hear what happened next. I grew up in a seemingly picture-perfect family in an upscale Connecticut suburb. My father James built his wealth through a successful import-export business. My mother Margaret never worked a day in her life, but excelled at spending money and maintaining our family's social status. And then there was my younger sister Sophia, 3 years my junior, and undeniably the favorite child from the moment she was born. Our house was spacious and elegant, situated in a neighborhood where people compared vacation homes and luxury vehicles over backyard barbecues. We had the swimming pool, the annual trips to Europe, and all the trappings of upper-middle-class comfort. From the outside, we looked like the American dream, but inside our perfectly decorated walls, there was an unspoken hierarchy that placed me firmly at the bottom. The difference in how my parents treated us was subtle at first, then impossible to ignore as we grew older. For my 10th birthday, I received a modest party with a few friends at home. For Sophia's 10th birthday, just 3 years later, my parents rented out an entire skating rink and hired a professional photographer to document the event. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, I might get a brief, "good job," if my father wasn't too busy. When Sophia managed to pull B minuses, my parents celebrated with dinner at an expensive restaurant. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my mother would explain when I questioned the disparity. "You've always been so independent and capable." That word independent became both a compliment and a curse throughout my childhood. It was their justification for giving me less while expecting more. Despite the uneven playing field at home, I threw myself into academics. School became my refuge, the one place where effort directly correlated with results. By my junior year of high school, I was taking a full load of AP classes, serving as editor of the school newspaper, and volunteering at the local hospital on weekends, partly because I loved the work, and partly because I knew a stellar college application was my ticket to freedom. The day I received my acceptance letter from Columbia University was one of the happiest of my life. I had been dreaming about attending Columbia's business program since I was 14, and now that dream was within reach. I still remember racing home, letter clutched in my hand, bursting through the front door to share the news with my parents. They were in the kitchen, my mother arranging flowers while my father read the newspaper. I announced my acceptance, voice trembling with excitement. My father looked up, briefly nodded, then returned to his newspaper. My mother gave a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before asking if I'd seen Sophia's new dance recital costume. That night at dinner, I brought up the topic of college costs. I had researched scholarships but knew they wouldn't cover everything. Columbia University was expensive, and I would need my parents' help. "Actually, your mother and I have been meaning to talk to you about that," my father said, setting down his fork. "We've decided that you'll be financing your education yourself." I stared at them, certain I had misheard. "What do you mean?" "We believe it's important for you to learn financial responsibility," my mother added smoothly. "You've always been so independent, Clarissa. This will be good for you." "But Columbia costs over $50,000 a year," I said, my voice rising. "How am I supposed to pay for that on my own?" "There are student loans, work-study programs," my father replied. "You're smart and capable. You'll figure it out." I looked from one parent to the other, waiting for the punchline that never came. "Is this a joke? You can afford it. I know you can." My father's expression hardened. "This isn't about what we can afford. It's about building character. The real world doesn't hand out free rides, Clarissa. The sooner you learn that, the better." The conversation ended there, with my dreams crashing around me. 2 weeks later, my parents presented 16-year-old Sophia with a brand new BMW for her birthday. The contradiction was so stark, so painful, that I couldn't even bring myself to comment on it. Instead, I retreated to my room and opened my laptop. If my parents wouldn't help me, I would find another way. Columbia was my dream, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me, not even the people who were supposed to support me most. The summer after high school graduation, I faced the harshest reality check of my young life. While my classmates enjoyed their last carefree months before college, I worked 2 jobs: morning shifts at a local cafe and evening shifts waiting tables at a busy restaurant. Every dollar I earned went into my college fund, but the math was still devastating. Even with maximum student loans, I was nowhere near covering Columbia's tuition. I considered more affordable state schools, but something inside me refused to give up. Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the need to prove my parents wrong. Whatever the reason, I committed to Columbia and prepared for 4 years of financial struggle. My first semester was a brutal adjustment. I found the cheapest possible housing, a tiny room in a 5-bedroom apartment in Washington Heights, shared with 4 other struggling students. My days started at 5 a.m. when I would head to a coffee shop near campus for a morning shift before classes. After my last class, I'd race to a restaurant in Midtown for the dinner service, often not returning to my apartment until after midnight. Only then could I start on homework due the next day. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. 4 hours a night with standard 5 was a blessing. My diet consisted primarily of free shift meals and discounted day-old pastries. I lost weight, developed perpetual dark circles under my eyes, and caught every cold that circulated through campus. The physical toll was difficult, but the emotional burden was heavier. During midterms of my first semester, I came down with the flu, but couldn't afford to miss work or exams. I remember sitting in the back row of my economics lecture, shivering with fever, trying desperately to focus on the professor's words, while my head pounded mercilessly. That evening, as I struggled through my waitressing shift, dropping a tray of drinks because my hands were shaking so badly, I broke down in the restaurant's back hallway. A senior coworker found me there, slid down the wall to sit beside me, and listened as I poured out my story between sobs. "Your parents are paying nothing." "Nothing at all?" she asked, incredulous. I nodded miserably. "But they could afford to help you." "They bought my sister a BMW last year," I whispered. She shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. "That's not teaching independence. That's just wrong." It was the first time another adult had validated what I'd always felt, but never fully acknowledged the treatment I received wasn't normal or fair. It was favoritism, plain and simple. The holidays that first year were particularly difficult. I went home for Christmas partly out of obligation, and partly because I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. Under our elaborately decorated tree, Sophia unwrapped a pair of diamond earrings and an all-expenses-paid spring break trip to the Bahamas with her friends. I received a leather-bound planner and a winter coat, practical gifts my mother described as things you actually need, dear. The coat was appreciated as my old one was falling apart. But the imbalance was stark and intentional. That night, I overheard my parents discussing Sophia's upcoming senior prom, planning to spend thousands on a designer dress. The same parents who couldn't spare a dollar for my education. The one bright spot during those difficult years came in the form of Professor Diana Franklin. She taught my Introduction to Financial Markets class and somehow noticed me despite my tendency to sit in the back row and rush out immediately after class to get to work. One day she asked me to stay after. Certain I was in trouble, I approached her desk with trepidation. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "your last paper was excellent, but I've noticed you seem exhausted. Is everything all right?" Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully maintained composure. Before I knew it, I was explaining my situation: the jobs, the loans, the lack of family support. Professor Franklin listened without interruption. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, first I'd like to offer you a position as my research assistant next semester. It pays better than waiting tables and will look better on your resume." I stared at her, stunned by the unexpected lifeline. "Second," she continued, "I have some connections at the financial aid office. Let's see if we can find you additional scholarship opportunities. Professor Franklin became more than a teacher. She became a mentor, and in some ways, the supportive parental figure I'd never had. She invited me to academic functions where I made valuable industry connections. She occasionally, accidentally, ordered too much food for lunch and insisted I take the extras. When I needed an expensive textbook, she'd suddenly remember having an extra copy I could borrow for the semester. With her guidance, I secured a prestigious summer internship after my sophomore year, allowing me to start building my resume while earning more than my previous jobs. I still worked constantly, still took maximum course loads to graduate on time, still lived on the financial edge, but now I had someone in my corner. By my senior year, I was working slightly less and sleeping slightly more. I graduated with honors, my GPA impressive despite my punishing work schedule. Professor Franklin beamed with pride at the ceremony, taking photos and introducing me to colleagues who might be hiring. My parents attended graduation, of course. Appearances were important to them. They smiled for pictures and told friends how proud they were of me. But halfway through the reception, they excused themselves. Sophia wanted to shop at some exclusive boutiques while they were in the city. As they left, my father pressed an envelope into my hand. "A little graduation gift," he said with a smile. Inside was a check for $500, a generous gift, by normal standards, an insulting pittance, considering the nearly $90,000 of student debt I was facing. I thanked them politely and tucked the check away, already calculating how little impact it would make on my mountain of loans. That night, alone in my apartment with my roommates all gone for the summer, I allowed myself one final cry over my family situation. Then I dried my tears, opened my laptop, and began applying for jobs. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still mine to shape. My first job after graduation was at Jensen Financial Consultants, a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. The starting salary was decent, though hardly extravagant for New York City. After securing the position, I found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn with 3 roommates, all of us young professionals trying to establish ourselves while managing student debt. My bedroom was barely larger than a closet, just enough space for a twin bed and a small dresser. But it was mine, paid for with my own money, and that made it more valuable than the spacious bedroom I'd grown up in. I created a strict financial plan. 50% of my income went to living expenses, 30% to loan repayment, and 20% to savings. This meant no vacations, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary, and social activities limited to happy hours and free events in the city. Lunch was always packed from home. Dinner was often a simple pasta dish that could stretch for several meals. I became an expert at finding free entertainment, museum free days, park concerts, library events. My roommates often went out for expensive brunches and shopping trips that I politely declined. "You're so disciplined," they would marvel. I could never stick to a budget like that. It wasn't discipline so much as necessity. The alternative, defaulting on my loans or remaining in debt for decades, was unthinkable. At work, I arrived early and stayed late. While some of my colleagues complained about demanding clients or boring tasks, I tackled everything with determination. Each assignment, no matter how mundane, was an opportunity to prove myself, to learn something new, to move one step closer to financial stability. This approach didn't go unnoticed. After my first performance review, my manager commented, "Most new analysts take time to adjust, but you hit the ground running. What's your secret?" "No secret," I replied. "I just understand the value of opportunity." By my second year at Jensen, I was assigned to work with more important clients. By my third year, I was leading small teams on significant projects. The turning point in my career came when our firm was hired to restructure a struggling retail company. The senior consultant initially assigned to the project fell ill, and I was tapped as a last-minute replacement. It was far beyond my experience level, but I immersed myself in the company's financials, worked around the clock, and developed a comprehensive restructuring plan that ended up saving the client millions while preserving most employee jobs. The client specifically requested me for follow-up work, and suddenly, I was on the executive radar. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior consultant with a substantial salary increase that allowed me to accelerate my loan payments. It was around this time that I met Michael Anderson. Unlike the finance bros I typically encountered, Michael was a software engineer who viewed money as a means rather than an end. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party, where he was refreshingly unimpressed by job titles and designer labels. "So, what do you do for fun?" he asked after I'd given the briefest possible description of my work. I blinked, momentarily thrown. Fun had been a low priority for so long that I had to think about my answer. "I'm rediscovering that concept, actually. Any recommendations?" He grinned. "Plenty. How do you feel about terrible movie marathons and homemade pizza?" Our relationship developed slowly. Between my work schedule and continued financial discipline, I didn't have much time for dating. But Michael was patient and understanding. He never complained when I needed to cancel plans to finish a project, or when I suggested cheaper alternatives to expensive outings. After 2 years at Jensen, I received an unexpected call from a headhunter. Meridian Investments. A prestigious firm known for its selective hiring wanted to interview me. The position they offered came with a six-figure salary that took my breath away, nearly double what I was currently making. With this new income, I could finally attack my student loans aggressively. Within 16 months, I made the final payment on my undergraduate debt. I still remember staring at the zero balance on my loan account, tears streaming down my face, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I'd carried for 7 long years. 3 months after becoming debt-free, I purchased my first home, a modern one-bedroom condo in a good neighborhood. It was small by suburban standards, but felt palatial compared to the shared apartments I'd been living in. The day I got my keys, Michael brought champagne and takeout. We sat on the floor of my empty living room, toasting to financial independence. "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his plastic cup. "Not many people could have done what you did." "Sometimes I can't believe it myself," I admitted. "From waiting tables to this, it doesn't feel real." What also didn't feel real was my parents' sudden renewed interest in my life. Throughout my struggling years, our contact had been minimal, obligatory holiday visits and occasional phone calls. But as news of my career advancement spread through family channels, my parents began reaching out more frequently. My mother called to ask about my new condo, offering decorating advice I hadn't requested. My father emailed articles about investment opportunities, suggesting we discuss family financial planning. Neither ever acknowledged their absence during my hardest years or expressed regret for their decision to withhold college support. Their rekindled attention came with subtle hints about family obligation. "Families should support each other," my mother remarked during one call. "Now that you're established, it's important to remember where you came from." The irony was palpable, but I kept my responses polite and non-committal. The hurt was still there, buried beneath years of independence and self-reliance. I had learned to live without their support, and while I didn't harbor active resentment, I wasn't ready to pretend the past hadn't happened. During a rare family dinner when I visited Connecticut, my father raised a toast. "To Clarissa, who has made us proud with her success. Family is everything, and we're so glad you've done well for yourself." I smiled tightly and sipped my wine, wondering if he remembered telling me family wouldn't give me free rides when I needed help most. The cognitive dissonance was stunning, but I had long since learned not to expect self-awareness from my parents. Later that evening, as my mother showed me Sophia's latest vacation photos, I caught my father studying me with an appraising look that made me distinctly uncomfortable. It was the same look he gave potential business investments, calculating value and return. At the time, I dismissed the observation as paranoia born from old wounds. I should have trusted my instincts. The news of Sophia's engagement came via an elaborate announcement card featuring a professional photo shoot of her and her fiancé Bradley looking deeply into each other's eyes against the Manhattan skyline. Bradley Harrison was the son of a prominent real estate developer who had recently partnered with my father on several lucrative projects. My mother called immediately after I would have received the card. Isn't it wonderful news Bradley is such a catch Harvard Business School family connections, and he absolutely adores Sophia. I'm happy for her, I said, and I genuinely meant it. Despite our complicated family dynamic, I'd never blame Sophia for our parents' favoritism. She was as much a product of their warped values as I was just from the opposite end of the spectrum. We're planning an engagement party at the Windsor Club next month, my mother continued. You'll be there, of course, and you can bring Michael if you'd like. The engagement party was exactly what I expected: lavish floral arrangements, premium open bar, a string quartet, and at least 200 guests mingling in their designer best. My parents worked the room like politicians, beaming with pride as they introduced Bradley's family to their social circle. Michael and I arrived fashionably on time, blending into the periphery of the celebration. I wore a simple black cocktail dress that had served me well through multiple professional events. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant and appropriate. My mother's eyes flicked over my outfit with a barely concealed grimace before she air-kissed my cheeks. Clarissa, darling, so glad you could make it. You remember the Andersons? Their daughter just got back from climbing Kilimanjaro. And with that, she whisked me into a conversation with people I barely remembered, smoothly extracting herself to attend to more important guests. It was a familiar dance from childhood: include me just enough to maintain appearances, then focus attention elsewhere. Michael squeezed my hand sympathetically before heading to the bar for drinks. As I made polite conversation about someone else's adventure vacation, I caught snippets of my father's booming voice from across the room. The merger will be finalized after the wedding, he was saying to a small group of attentive men. Harrison Development's portfolio combined with our international connections, it's a match made in heaven, just like our kids. I frowned, excusing myself from the Andersons to move closer to my father's conversation. Must have cost a fortune to secure that deal, one man commented with a knowing chuckle. These society weddings are basically business transactions with cake these days. My father laughed. Worth every penny for this connection. And speaking of pennies, wait until you see what we're planning for the wedding. Nothing but the best for my princess and her power broker husband. The conversation shifted to golf scores, but I'd heard enough to understand that Sophia's wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a business merger disguised as a family event. I wandered to the bar, troubled by the naked, transactional nature of what should have been a joyous occasion. Over the following weeks, our family group text buzzed constantly with wedding updates from Sophia and my mother. The venue was a historic castle in the Hamptons. The guest list had expanded to 400. The flowers would be flown in from Holland. The dress was being custom designed by a famous European fashion house. Each message hinted at increasingly extravagant costs, without ever mentioning specific numbers. I remained mostly silent in these exchanges, offering brief congratulations or simple thumbs-up emojis when direct response seemed required. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon in September, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door to find my parents standing there, I was genuinely surprised. They rarely visited me in the city, preferring that I come to them in Connecticut. Mom, Dad, this is unexpected, I said, stepping aside to let them in. We were in the neighborhood, my mother said airily, though my apartment wasn't near anything that would normally draw them to the city. My father surveyed my condo with poorly disguised assessment. Nice place you've got here. Good investment in this market. I offered them drinks and made awkward small talk about the weather, recent movies, and innocuous family news. The forced pleasantries continued until my father finally cleared his throat and exchanged a meaningful look with my mother. Clarissa, we wanted to talk to you about something important, he began, setting down his untouched coffee. As you know, Sophia's wedding is going to be the social event of the season. My mother nodded enthusiastically. We've secured the castle, the caterer, the designer. Everything is falling into place beautifully. That sounds lovely, I said cautiously, sensing a preamble to something less pleasant. My father shifted in his seat. The thing is, we've committed to certain aspects of the wedding that are a bit more costly than we initially budgeted for. Dad's being modest, my mother interjected. We want this to be absolutely perfect for Sophia and the Harrison family. It's about making connections that will benefit everyone. I remained silent, waiting for them to reach their point. We'd like you to contribute to the wedding fund, my father finally said. Specifically, we need $150,000 to cover some of the premium elements that will really make this event special. The amount hit me like a physical blow. $150,000. More than my entire college education had cost, more than the down payment on my condo, an astronomical sum to ask of anyone, let alone their daughter, whom they had refused to help through school. You want me to give you $150,000 for Sophia's wedding? I repeated slowly, certain I must have misunderstood. It's not just for the wedding, my mother explained, as if that clarified everything. It's an investment in family connections. The Harrisons are extremely influential. This alliance will open doors for all of us. We've already told Sophia you'd be happy to help, my father added casually. She's your sister after all. Family supports family. That last phrase, family supports family, ignited something deep inside me. It was so blatantly hypocritical, so outrageously unfair, that for a moment, I couldn't speak. The same parents who had refused to give me a dime for my education were now asking me for a small fortune, for a single day of celebration, for their favorite child. As I sat there processing their request, memories flooded back, working double shifts with a fever, eating ramen for days straight, to afford textbooks, crying silently in my tiny shared bedroom when the stress became too much. All while my parents funded Sophia's every whim. And now they sat in my living room in my home that I had earned entirely on my own, asking me to hand over more money than many people make in 3 years, as if it were the most natural request in the world. For several long seconds after my parents' outrageous request, I sat perfectly still, fighting to keep my expression neutral while a storm raged inside me. My hands trembled slightly, and I clasped them tightly in my lap to hide the reaction. The silence stretched uncomfortably as my parents exchanged glances, clearly expecting an immediate and positive response. When I finally found my voice, it emerged with a calm that surprised even me. I'd like to make sure I understand correctly. You're asking me for $150,000 for Sophia's wedding after refusing to help me with my college tuition 12 years ago. My father's expression hardened. That was different, Clarissa. College was about building your independence. And this wedding is about what exactly? It's about family, my mother interjected smoothly. About celebrating your sister's happiness and future. The same sister who got a brand new BMW while I was working double shifts to afford textbooks. The words escaped before I could filter them, years of carefully suppressed resentment finding its way to the surface. My father's face flushed. That was a long time ago. You turned out fine, didn't you? Look at your success. Our approach clearly worked. I succeeded despite your approach, not because of it, I replied, my voice growing stronger. Do you have any idea what those years were like for me? Working 30 hours a week while taking full course loads, going to class with fevers because I couldn't afford to miss a day, living on ramen and day-old pastries. My mother waved her hand dismissively. You're being dramatic. Everyone struggles in college. Not everyone has parents who could help but choose not to, I countered. Not everyone watches their sister receive cars and vacations while they can barely afford rent. Are you still holding on to that? My father asked incredulously. For God's sake, Clarissa, that was years ago. Grow up and move past it. His casual dismissal of my experience ignited something fierce within me. I stood up suddenly, unable to remain seated in their presence. You told me the real world doesn't give out free rides, I said, recalling his exact words from that devastating conversation years ago. You said I needed to learn financial responsibility. You said it was about building character. My parents shifted uncomfortably on my sofa. So now I'm wondering, I continued, what character-building lesson will Sophia learn from this $150,000 wedding? What financial responsibility will she gain from this experience? My mother's expression turned cold. This isn't about lessons, Clarissa. This is about supporting your sister on the most important day of her life. No, I replied firmly. This is about a business merger disguised as a wedding. I overheard Dad at the engagement party. This is about connecting with the Harrisons for business purposes. My father stood abruptly. That's enough. We came here expecting support from a daughter who has done well for herself. Instead, we find a petty, jealous woman holding on to childish grudges. Jealous, I repeated, genuinely astounded by his characterization. Is that what you think this is about? What else could it be? My mother asked. You've always been jealous of the attention we gave Sophia. I shook my head, amazed at their inability to see the fundamental injustice they had created and continued to perpetuate. This isn't about jealousy. It's about basic fairness and respect. It's about you treating your daughters as equals. We've always treated you girls equally, my mother insisted, her voice rising defensively. The absurdity of her statement nearly made me laugh. Really? When Sophia needed a car, she got a brand new BMW. When I needed college tuition, I got a lecture on independence. How is that equal? My father's patience was clearly wearing thin. We're not here to rehash ancient history. We're here about the wedding. Are you going to help your sister or not? I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what needed to be said. No, I will not be contributing $150,000 to Sophia's wedding. The stunned silence that followed was almost satisfying. What did you say? My father finally managed his voice dangerously quiet. I said no. And I think Sophia needs to learn independence. I added, deliberately echoing their words to me. The real world doesn't give out free rides, right? My mother's face crumpled into an expression of hurt that might have been convincing if I hadn't seen her use the same look to manipulate situations countless times before. How can you be so cruel to your own sister? I'm not being cruel. I'm being consistent. You taught me the value of earning my own way, and it's a lesson I've taken to heart. Perhaps it's time Sophia learned it too. My father grabbed his coat, face flushed with anger. You'll regret this decision, Clarissa. You're destroying family harmony over money. That's rich coming from you, I replied calmly. You're the ones who taught me that money matters more than family support. We're leaving, he announced, taking my mother's arm. When you've had time to reconsider this selfish position, you can call us. As they headed for the door, my mother turned back, tears glistening in her eyes. Just remember, families need to stick together. Someday you might need us, and then what? I met her gaze steadily. I've needed you before, Mom. You taught me exactly what to expect. The door closed behind them with a decisive click, and I sank back onto my couch, emotionally drained but strangely calm. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my parents, refusing to accept their warped version of reality. My phone began buzzing almost immediately. Text messages from aunts and uncles I rarely spoke with, expressing disappointment in my selfishness. A voicemail from my grandmother, asking why I was causing trouble. My parents had wasted no time in spinning their narrative to the extended family. Then came the call from Sophia herself, her voice shrill and accusatory when I answered. How could you do this to me, after everything our family has done for you? I frowned at her words. What exactly do you think our family has done for me, Sophia? Don't play dumb, she snapped. Mom and Dad have always supported both of us. Now it's your turn to help, and you're being selfish and petty. Her complete ignorance of my college situation stunned me. Sophia, do you know how I paid for Columbia? What does that have to do with anything? She demanded. Just answer the question. How do you think I paid for college? There was a brief hesitation. I don't know. Mom and Dad helped, I guess, like they did with everything else. And there it was, the revelation that Sophia had no idea about the disparity in our treatment. Our parents had maintained completely different narratives for each of us, never allowing us to compare notes or recognize the manipulation. Sophia, Mom and Dad didn't pay a single dollar toward my education, I said quietly. They refused to help me with tuition. I worked 2 jobs throughout college and graduated with massive debt that took me 7 years to pay off. Silence followed my statement, then a dismissive scoff. You're lying. They would never do that. Why would I lie about something so easily verified? Ask their friends. Ask Professor Jenkins from high school who helped me apply for scholarships. Ask anyone who knew me during college. This is just another example of you trying to make yourself the victim, she accused, but there was a new note of uncertainty in her voice. You've always been dramatic. Think about it, Sophia. Have you ever seen any evidence that they helped me through school? Any mention of tuition payments? Any discussion of my student loans? You can verify everything I'm saying. The conversation ended shortly after with Sophia still angry, but noticeably shaken. As I put my phone down, I felt emotionally exhausted, but also lighter somehow, as if speaking these truths aloud had released something long trapped inside me. Later that evening, Michael came over bringing comfort food and a sympathetic ear. As we sat together on my couch, I recounted the entire confrontation, including details of my college struggles that I rarely shared with anyone. I'm proud of you, he said when I finished. Standing up to family is one of the hardest things to do. I just hope Sophia verifies what I told her, I said quietly. She deserves to know the truth about our family dynamic. And if she doesn't, I considered his question carefully. Then I'll have to accept that and move forward. I can't control how others perceive reality, only how I respond to it. Michael took my hand, his expression serious. Whatever happens next, remember you did nothing wrong. You set a boundary based on your values and experiences. That's not just appropriate, it's necessary for your well-being. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I realized something important. For the first time in my life. I had chosen my own definition of family obligation, rather than accepting the warped version my parents had tried to impose. And regardless of the fallout, that choice felt absolutely right. The days following my confrontation with my parents were surprisingly quiet. I had expected continued harassment, more family members calling to pressure me, perhaps even workplace embarrassment from my father's business connections. Instead, there was an eerie silence, as if my parents were regrouping to plan their next approach. The respite ended abruptly one Wednesday afternoon when Sophia texted me, "Coffee tomorrow. Just us, 10 a.m. at Rosewood Cafe on 7th. I agreed immediately, both anxious and hopeful about the possibility of an honest conversation with my sister. We had never been close, separated by our parents' differential treatment and the 3-year age gap that seemed wider during our formative years. But perhaps now, as adults, we could finally speak openly. The Rosewood Cafe was a neutral location, neither close to my apartment nor to Sophia's Murray Hill residence. When I arrived, Sophia was already seated at a corner table, nervously turning her engagement ring around her finger. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of anger and confusion. I slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks for suggesting this." She nodded stiffly, pushing a second coffee toward me. "I ordered for you. Black with 1 sugar, right?" The fact that she remembered my coffee preference, such a small thing, unexpectedly touched me. "Yes, thank you." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until Sophia finally spoke. "I talked to Mrs. Hendricks, Mrs. Hendricks had been our next-door neighbor throughout our childhood, a kind but straightforward woman who had always treated Sophia and me identically, a rarity in our lives. She confirmed everything you said," Sophia continued, her voice tight. "About college, about working multiple jobs, about mom and dad refusing to help you financially." I remained silent, letting her process this information at her own pace. "I also found some old family photos from your college graduation," she added. "There's one where you're posing with some older woman I don't recognize, and she has her arm around you like she's, I don't know, really proud of you." "Professor Franklin," I supplied. "My mentor at Columbia." Sophia nodded slowly. "Mrs. Hendricks mentioned her too. Said she was more of a mother to you during college than Mom was." I took a sip of my coffee, unsure how to respond. Diana Franklin had indeed been the maternal figure I desperately needed during those difficult years. But saying so felt like a betrayal of our mother, complicated as that relationship was. "Why?" Sophia finally asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Why would they help me with everything and leave you to struggle?" It was the question I'd asked myself countless times over the years, never finding a satisfactory answer. I don't know, Sophia. I've wondered that for most of my life. Did you do something to make them angry? Something I don't know about? I shook my head. Not that I'm aware of. The favoritism started when we were very young, long before either of us could have done anything to deserve different treatment. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I feel like my whole childhood was a lie. All those times they told me how proud they were of both their daughters, how they treated us the same. They needed you to believe that, I said gently. Otherwise, their behavior would look exactly what it was, unfair and manipulative. She wiped at her eyes. But why tell me now? Why not years ago? Would you have believed me then? I asked honestly. Or would you have seen it as jealousy, or me trying to come between you and our parents? Her silence was answer enough. Besides, I continued, what would telling you have accomplished? You were a child too, Sophia. The problem wasn't with you, it was with Mom and Dad. You didn't create the situation, and you couldn't have fixed it. Sophia stared into her coffee cup. I feel like I should apologize, but I don't even know what for. For being the favorite, for not noticing, for benefiting from their unfairness. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. You were as much a pawn in their game as I was, just in a different way. They robbed me of support, but they robbed you of the chance to develop genuine independence and self-reliance. Like this wedding, Sophia said suddenly, her eyes widening with realization. $150,000 for flowers and a designer cake. It's obscene. And the truth is, I don't even want most of it. I looked at her in surprise. You don't? She shook her head. The castle venue. The 400 guests, most of whom are Dad's business associates or Mom's social climber friends, none of that was my idea. What would you want if it were entirely up to you? Sophia thought for a moment. Something smaller, more intimate, maybe a destination wedding with just close friends and family. Bradley and I actually talked about eloping to Italy early on, but Mom nearly had a heart attack at the suggestion. For the first time, I glimpsed a version of my sister separate from our parents' influence, a young woman with her own preferences and values buried beneath years of parental expectations. And speaking of Bradley, Sophia hesitated, lowering her voice. I overheard him talking to his father about the business advantages of marrying into our family. He didn't know I was there, and he was speaking so coldly, like I was an acquisition, not a person. My heart sank at her words. Have you talked to him about it? I tried to bring it up indirectly, and he dismissed me, said I was being insecure. She twisted her engagement ring again, this time as if it were uncomfortable. Now I can't stop thinking about it. Is our entire relationship just a business arrangement our parents orchestrated? Before I could respond, Sophia's phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it and her expression darkened. It's Mom. They're wondering where I am. Apparently we have a cake tasting scheduled that I can't miss. You should go, I said. We can continue this conversation another time. Sophia nodded, gathering her things, but paused before standing. Clarissa, thank you for telling me the truth even when it was hard. I think I needed to hear it. As she left the cafe, I remained seated, processing our conversation. For the first time in our lives, Sophia and I had connected as equals, as sisters, without our parents' influence distorting our relationship. It felt like the beginning of something important, though I couldn't yet see where it might lead. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia later that evening. Can we meet again tomorrow? Same place, same time. There's more I want to discuss. Over the next 3 days, Sophia and I met regularly, piecing together the complex puzzle of our childhood from our different perspectives. She shared stories of the pressure she'd felt to be perfect, to justify our parents' favoritism. I described the independence I'd been forced to develop and how it had shaped my approach to life. Gradually, a genuine bond began to form between us, perhaps the first real connection we'd ever had. We laughed over shared memories of family vacations, cried together over opportunities we'd each missed because of our parents' manipulation, and began to envision a future where we could be allies rather than unconscious competitors. During our fourth meeting, Sophia arrived looking unusually determined. "I've made a decision," she announced before even sitting down. "I'm postponing the wedding." I stared at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" She nodded firmly. "I need time to figure out if I'm marrying Bradley because I love him or because it's what everyone expects. And I definitely don't want a wedding that's really just a business merger with cake." "How did Bradley take the news?" Sophia's expression hardened. "Not well. He immediately called his father, who called our father. They're all in crisis mode trying to talk sense into me, which only confirms that my instincts were right." "And Mom and Dad?" "Furious doesn't begin to cover it," she said with a grim smile. "Dad actually threatened to cut me off financially if I don't get back on track." "That sounds familiar," I remarked dryly. "I told him maybe it was time I learned some independence," Sophia replied, and we both burst into unexpected laughter at the irony. When our amusement subsided, Sophia looked at me seriously. "I might need a place to stay for a while. Things at home are tense." "My couch is yours for as long as you need it," I offered without hesitation. 2 days later, Sophia arrived at my condo with 2 suitcases and tear-stained cheeks. The confrontation with our parents had escalated beyond what either of us anticipated. "They said I was betraying the family," she explained as I helped her settle in. "That I'd been corrupted by your bitterness. Dad accused me of sabotaging an important business connection just to spite them. And Bradley showed his true colors," she said flatly. "When I suggested we postpone and do something smaller later, he said, and I quote, 'My father invested too much in this relationship for us to downgrade now.' Like I was a stock option." I winced at his callousness. "I'm sorry, Sophia. You deserve better." She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "The engagement is officially over. The ring is back with the Harrisons, along with their precious business merger." As difficult as the situation was, I could see a new strength emerging in my sister, a resilience born from making her first truly independent choice. Over the following weeks, that strength continued to grow as she navigated life without our parents' financial support for the first time. I helped her create a resume drawing on skills she'd developed through volunteer work and event planning. Through one of my professional connections, she secured an entry-level position at a nonprofit organization focused on education access work that she found genuinely fulfilling. "I've never actually earned my own money before," she confessed after receiving her first paycheck. "It's a strange feeling, but I like it. Like this is really mine, not something given to me that could be taken away." I understood that feeling perfectly. That's exactly it. There's a security and self-reliance that no amount of family money can provide. As Sophia established her independence, I introduced her to Professor Diana Franklin, who had remained a mentor and friend throughout my adult life. Diana took Sophia under her wing, just as she had done for me, offering guidance and perspective from outside our dysfunctional family system. Our parents maintained radio silence for nearly 3 months. No calls, no texts, not even passive-aggressive messages through extended family. It was as if both their daughters had ceased to exist the moment we stepped outside their control. Then, on a cold December evening, my phone displayed an unexpected caller, my father. I stared at the screen for several rings before finally answering. "Clarissa," he said, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "Your mother and I would like to have dinner with you and Sophia, to talk." I agreed cautiously, arranging to meet at a neutral restaurant rather than their home or mine. When I told Sophia about the invitation, she reacted with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. "I'm not going back to the way things were," she stated firmly, "no matter what they say." "Neither am I assured her. "We go together, we stay together, and we leave together if necessary." The dinner was as uncomfortable as expected. Our parents looked older, somehow diminished by the loss of control over their daughters' lives. My mother attempted her usual social pleasantries while my father sat mostly silent, studying us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, after the main course was served, he cleared his throat. "We've been doing some thinking. About family. About the past." My mother nodded. "We may have made some mistakes." It was perhaps the closest thing to an admission of wrongdoing I had ever heard from either of them. Beside me, Sophia straightened in her chair, waiting. "The wedding situation got out of hand," my father continued. "We were focused on the business aspects and lost sight of what should have been important: Sophia's happiness. And we may have been uneven in our approach to your educations," my mother added hesitantly. I raised an eyebrow at the understatement but remained silent. "The point is," my father said, his businessman's instinct for negotiation taking over, "we'd like to move forward. As a family, we miss having our daughters in our lives." What followed was a careful dance of words, not quite apologies, not quite promises, but tentative steps toward acknowledgement. They didn't fully admit the extent of their favoritism or manipulation, but they did express a desire to establish a new, healthier relationship with both their daughters. As Sophia and I walked home from the restaurant, she asked, "What do you think? Should we give them another chance?" I considered the question carefully. I think forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or enabling harmful patterns to continue. It means moving forward with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. She nodded thoughtfully. "So we can have a relationship with them without letting them manipulate us again." Exactly. We decide what kind of relationship we want, not them. Over the following months, we cautiously rebuilt contact with our parents on our own terms. We declined financial offers, established clear boundaries around personal decisions, and corrected manipulative behaviors when they emerged. It wasn't always smooth and there were setbacks along the way, but slowly a new family dynamic began to take shape. Sophia flourished in her newfound independence, eventually moving into her own apartment and advancing at work. She started dating again, more carefully this time, choosing partners who valued her for herself rather than her family connections. Together, we established a small scholarship fund for students without family financial support, turning our personal pain into something positive for others facing similar challenges. It wasn't a large fund, but it provided emergency grants that could mean the difference between dropping out and continuing education for struggling students. Looking back now, 4 years after that fateful day, when my parents showed up asking for money for Sophia's wedding, I can see how that moment became a turning point for our entire family. What began as a painful confrontation evolved into an opportunity for growth, truth, and ultimately healing. The journey wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations, tears, and periods of distance. But through it all, something unexpected happened. Sophia and I discovered the sister relationship we should have had all along. Without our parents' favoritism creating an artificial divide between us, we found common ground, shared values, and genuine affection for each other. Sophia now runs the education nonprofit, where she once started as an entry-level employee. She's engaged to David, a kind-hearted teacher she met through her work, a man who loves her for who she is, not for family connections or business opportunities. Their planned wedding is a simple affair at a botanical garden with only their closest friends and family invited. My parents have changed too, though not completely. Old habits die hard, and they occasionally slip into their former patterns. The difference now is that Sophia and I recognize these behaviors immediately and address them together. We've learned that maintaining healthy boundaries requires constant vigilance, but the peace it brings is worth the effort. As for me, I've founded my own financial consulting firm, specializing in helping first-generation professionals manage sudden wealth, whether from career success, inheritance, or other sources. My experience navigating financial independence without guidance gave me unique insight into the emotional and practical challenges these clients face. Michael and I married last year in a ceremony that reflected our values: meaningful, not extravagant. Professor Diana Franklin was my matron of honor, honoring the woman who supported me when my own family couldn't. My parents attended and, to their credit, respected our wishes for a modest celebration. The greatest lesson I've learned through this journey is that self-worth isn't determined by others' validation, even from those who should love us most. True independence isn't just financial, it's the freedom to define your own path and set your own boundaries based on your values, not others' expectations. Family relationships are complex, and healing doesn't always mean everything becomes perfect. Sometimes it means accepting imperfection while refusing to participate in harmful patterns. Forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and love doesn't demand blind acceptance of mistreatment. Building your own path isn't easy. There will be times of doubt, moments of exhaustion, and periods of loneliness. But there's a special kind of strength that comes from navigating difficulties on your own terms, a resilience that can't be given to you, but must be earned through experience. For those of you facing similar family dynamics or financial inequities, know that you're not alone. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, and your success is valid even if you had to work harder for it than others. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and ultimately for our families is to stand firm in our truth and refuse to perpetuate unhealthy patterns. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who treated you unfairly? How did you navigate that difficult terrain while protecting your own well-being? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your story is still being written and you hold the pen.